Lady Laura, welcome and thank you so much for joining. This is such an honor. You're one of the sort of greatest creative tour de forces in the world. So congratulations. This is an honor I've bestowed upon you. And I think rather than me trying to say all of the amazing things you do, I just wondered if you could take 2 minutes to say who you are and roughly what you do, and then we'll get into a nice chat.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Laura JB. I am President and Chief Creative Officer here at Grey in the UK. Loving it. And then because I am very passionate about the power of creativity to create positive change, I'm also the creator of a bunch of other things. So one being SheSays, which is 15 years old this year, which is the largest global network to advance the careers of women in the creative industries. So we're in, I would say, maybe 55 odd countries around the world.
Wow.
And then the other more recent thing over COVID is I co-founded, it's an app called OCO, which connects disadvantaged youth with mentors in business, kind of at that stage where you don't really know what you want to do professionally because you maybe haven't been exposed to all the options. So it kind of helps young people find their superpower. We connect them using sort of shared personality traits. So it means that there's already like a connection and a point of focus when you first start off, which kind of, ends up in much more successful mentoring. So that, but a bunch of other things as well. I run the Can't Festival for people that can't get a can, and a load of other stuff.
We'll get into all of it. But you've got a lovely twang on your accent. I can say I know you've made a transition. How did that journey begin? Because I'd imagine that there's a lot of stuff that maybe happened at the beginning of your career that helped shape the things that you've ended up doing now. And
look, so I started out at art school. So sort of entered art school right when the internet was starting. So I was a couple of years in when the more consumer-facing internet kicked off in 1994. And just completely fell in love with it. I'd always been sort of quite geeky at school and realised there was a really nice crossover between creativity and geekiness that was starting to happen in digital art. So CD-ROMs and early websites and interactive art, all of that kind of stuff. So I kind of threw myself into it. Then whilst I was at university, realised I could make money out of what I was doing for my art, because there weren't a lot of people that could, at the time everything was hand cut and coded and it was really fiddly. So I started my own business called Joystick Digital Media, and I would go into advertising agencies who had built websites but had no idea how to get them off the flat page. So they were sort of designed in Photoshop or InDesign or what have you. And they would basically give me the files and I would make everything work for the internet, cut and code it, upload it, do them a database if they needed one, all of that kind of stuff, and deliver them back as a site.
wow.
And that's kind of how I got started in the industry. So I'm not trained in advertising or design or anything like that. It was literally through my art. Then I also used to teach at my old art college, and so I'd work 4 days a week and teach a day a week at art college. And this person came in to speak to my first years who completely blew me away. His name's Simon Waterfall. He founded an agency called Deep End, which is, sadly long gone, apart from in Australia, actually, where it still exists. But he was super inspiring. The work that I saw was so much more advanced than the stuff that was happening in Australia. In Sydney, and he was opening up an office in Sydney, and so I just asked him afterwards, can I please have a job at your agency because your stuff is really cool. He was really interesting. He seemed like a very kind of compassionate leader, as well as being, a real sort of rebel. I think the talk he did for my students, he was maybe wearing a kilt or maybe wearing a wedding dress, I'm not sure, and like with blue mohawk and what have you. And I just, thought that's the kind of place I want to work, where you can be yourself and and love what you do. So asked him for a role, and he was just like, look, it's at the time it was the coolest digital agency in the world, and he just said, look, you don't have the skills. We only hire the best designers in the world, and you're not even trained in design. But go and learn some more, and next time I'm back in Sydney, I'll see your portfolio again. And I'm like, I just set my mind on working there. So I think I probably saw him every time he came to Australia to get his office set up, and in that first year maybe, I'd see him every time he came to Sydney. And then eventually he contacted me and said, look, there's a job going. It's not as a designer, but do you want to come work at Deep End as a producer? And I just thought, like, fuck yeah, I will do like anything to work for this company.
Yeah.
So I went, took the job there, and then probably 2 years in, and I was learning from the best designers in the world, because they were the designers in the building, and I was still doing a lot of design on the side and learning more stuff. He said, there is a design job going in London. Do you want it? It's the most junior designer, but if you want to come. So I just thought, I will. And so I think I packed everything up and came over here in about 6 weeks. And I think it was on 12 grand a year. And went from there. But again, like, suddenly I was doing the job that I dreamed of, but next to the most phenomenal designers and creatives in London. And actually that my first desk mate, I don't know whether you know Lolly at all, who's now at McCann, who's as the chief creative officer with Rob over at McCann in London. He was my desk mate. So, literally bumping elbows with the very, very best, and learning on the job as I went along.
It's so lovely that sort of, you took a job even though it wasn't the job that you wanted, in order to give you access to potentially the job that you wanted. And I think, I mean, that it takes a certain person to be able to do that as well. Like, I think a lot of people would be so nervous. They'd be like, oh, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe I need to hold out to the one that's actually right for me. It's a good lesson there.
I think in a way, I'm lucky. I always say I'm lucky because I'm really comfortable being uncomfortable. I enjoy being uncomfortable. I enjoy throwing myself in the deep end, and always have done. And part of that is, my high school, we had 100 boys and only 20 girls at the school. I was always a tomboy. I was the only girl in my entire football league. Everyone else in the entire league were boys until I was about 16. I was, desperate to join the Scouts, not the Girl Guides. I've always had some contrariness, or like hadn't quite fit in the right places, if you know what I mean. And there's great freedom in that, I think, to go, well, I'm never going to fit, so I may as well just throw myself in and stand out.
I mean, when you, I mean, obviously looking after a lot of creatives now in your current job, how do you, I mean, I guess it must be quite important for you to try and make them feel comfortable, comfortable feeling uncomfortable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. The creatives and the rest of the agency and the clients as well. And I think,
do you have any tips on how you help them get there? Or,
you know what? I think one of the things, it very much depends. If you're a younger creative, finding a culture that allows you to express who you are and to be yourself.
Right.
Like somewhere where difference is really celebrated, and where as a collective you can answer everything, but you don't need to know everything on your own. So, I would say more than a tip in terms of how I do it, I would say, like, look for those places where that culture exists. And you can usually tell them because the leadership are more connected. They listen more. You can tell just by stepping in somewhere and looking at the makeup of the department, what that might be like. And I've certainly been in places which have very much not been like that. And it's not something I ever wanted to create, that sense of being made to feel out of place. I want everyone to feel like they belong in their own personal, weirdness and experience.
And you're doing a great thing at Grey at the moment, aren't you? There's I don't know whether it's still there, but didn't Grey change their name today, or is that just the London office, or is it a global thing?
That was just the London office, and I can't take credit for that. It's an amazing team here, we value sort of Grey here in London. What we say is at the heart, and we've made sure it's at the heart of everything that we do internally, not just what we say, is this idea of collision of difference, right? So if creativity is all sorts of things smashed together to make something new, it just makes more sense that if you're taking ideas or thoughts from other places, if you don't have cultural consensus, if you're not all from the same background, or you don't have the same stories, you're going to get to better ideas because you're going to find things that no one else can find. So that, for me, is the essence of creativity. So we've kind of made sure that everything here, from hiring policies, and that the ERGs here are really empowered. So ERGs, for those who don't know, because I didn't know the formal name for them before I joined a big company, but they're the groups like our LGBTQ plus group, Unite, or we've got a group for parents and carers, we've got a group for ethnically diverse staff. They're really, really empowered here to come with ideas and for us to make them happen. And so the idea of they came from one of those groups, from Unite. It was just so brilliant at a time in the UK where trans rights have never been more in danger, and trans people have never been more threatened, to do something really important for trans visibility and to talk about everything that we do here for the LGBTQ plus community at Grey. So we are, at the moment, we are still they, but we are setting up our new TikTok channel soon, which is going to be where they will sit, and that is going to have everything in terms of what we do around collision of difference. So everything we do to celebrate people's difference.
So if anyone's listening and they're looking for a nice, diverse place to work,
yeah, absolutely,
they're in advertising,
100%.
Grey London could be your place. I'd love to talk a little bit about the SheSays startup as well. I mean, that after you'd moved to London, and because I'm guessing it must have been related. And my background is also early days of digital marketing, and I mean, it was very blokey. I remember we started sort of girl geek dinners in South Africa and a bunch of other places as well. Is that where that comes from, and how's that evolved over time?
I've always been passionate about gender equity in our industry and in the world, and very passionate, as you said, about kind of digital. So when I was in Australia, actually, I worked with an amazing woman, Rosie Cross, who founded something called Geek Girl, which is the first cyber feminist hyperzine. That means it was online and an actual magazine. And I worked with her for quite a few years making that happen. A lot of my artwork had to do with gender roles and gender stereotypes, and sort of breaking those down, and particularly on the internet, because if anyone was on the early days of the internet, it was very blokey, very pornographic, very lecherous, all of that stuff. You had to pretend to be a man to be able to do anything, because if you identified as a woman online, you would just get harassment. So when I moved here and then sort of went through the ranks and ended up, it was actually when I was head of art at Glue, which is now part of Isobot, which is now part of Dentsu. But I was running a team of, I guess, probably about 35 people, and I think I was the only woman, or there may have been one other woman in my department who was quite junior. And I would be asked a lot to go and, speak at conferences or what have you, and I was always the only woman, except for one other woman here in the UK, this amazing woman called Ali Lariu, who's the Brazilian creative, and she was a creative director at another agency. So we'd always be like, hello, digital woman, hello, other digital woman. And that's how we became friends. But when we were looking at, because if you remember in the 2000s, feminism was really unpopular, and there was the kind of the conversation was really around how everything was fine and that we didn't need feminism anymore, and it was the time of ladettes and what have you. And it was very, very uncool to kind of talk about the fact there was still disparity. But when we looked at our departments, we went, look, there's something seriously wrong, because we're not seeing any women even applying for the roles. And then when they do apply for the roles, because both of us are in charge of, interviewing, what we're finding is that women are selling themselves in a very different way to men. And if you weren't a woman, you wouldn't pick that up, and you wouldn't know, look for potential rather than for what these people, the men, I guess, have achieved. And so we thought we need to do something to change the industry. We didn't know what that was. SheSays started out with just a few of us. We, borrowed an agency, Dare, overnight, or sort of in the evening with some wine, just to talk about the issues. And then we realised, actually, in the coming together, there was incredible strength and power. And so we did it again, and we made a commitment very early on to, number one, keep a sense of humour about ourselves. Number two, always, at everything that we did that was SheSays, deliver kind of tools to improve your careers rather than talk about the issues, because talking about the issues is exhausting and it doesn't get you anywhere, particularly when you're talking to the people who already know. So, it became a monthly event in London where we would just make sure that the women that came to the events left more able to go into their businesses and kind of rock it. So, filling you full of, whether it's ideas or techniques or strategies or whatever we felt that people wanted to know, and very much involving that community as it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and always making sure also that the speakers were always women, because right at the beginning we had so many people say, but if the speakers are always women, you're going to run out of women in a couple of months. So I'm sure there are other really great women out there.
Yeah.
And that's a commitment that we've kept now for 15 years. Ali moved to New York. She set up in New York, and that was probably 10 years ago. And since then, it's just exploded. So we're in Dubai. We're kind of everywhere.
And I guess, are these primarily real world or digital meetups, or
so they were exclusively real world meetups until COVID. And when COVID hit, we realised that we've got a real power in the network, and in the membership. We've got over 70,000 people, women kind of worldwide, so connected to SheSays. So we moved everything onto Zoom really, really quickly and started doing sort of virtual stuff. And now that things are starting to lessen the lockdown a little bit, we're doing a little bit of both. And we're also exploring other things. So we've just got a new mentoring platform going out for SheSays called The Way, which is asks you a little bit about yourself. It's really for mid-career women, asks you a little bit about yourself, and then serves you really great content regularly to, again, help train you up. So you might learn about finance, or you might learn about negotiation, or writing a brief, or whatever it is, all these different aspects of the job. So we're always trying to innovate.
And how, there are two things. Firstly, if anyone wants to join up, where can they go to become a member? If you go to
weareshesays.com,
here's what I found.
And just sign up there.
Okay, fantastic. And then there was something else that you mentioned, which was interesting. It's sort of, you're saying that you're training them on things like negotiation and creativity and those kind of things. And it's something I guess we deal with a lot as well, in that I think those skills are just becoming more and more important, and a lot of the hard skills increasingly become more and more automated. And it's like I almost feel like the soft skills become the new hard skills. Like they're the things that help give you your superpower so that you can go to any role, any job. But it is, I don't know, it's an interesting thing. And I wonder whether there's a reframing needed for soft skills, because it sounds like a bad word. Like it sounds like these are things that you don't really need. They're the soft skills.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think soft skills are the most important things that you need now for business. And you're right, everything else is becoming automated. And even like the more practical, pragmatic side of creativity is being automated, right? There's kind of so much now that you don't need to do. And the magic that we add are those soft skills. It's the amazing brain you have and the weird way that it connects things. It's the way that you communicate. It's the way that you listen. You know, all of that stuff. Negotiate yourself.
Yeah, because you're a big advocate for the power of creativity, and I mean, I guess there's lots of different roles that you could have been doing, but you've chosen to, you know, for now anyway, you've chosen to stay in advertising and help fight the fight here. Like, well, why is that? What do you think the power of creativity is, and why, you know, how are you helping to push it in the right direction, I guess, in the industry?
I think one of the reasons that I still love advertising, or, you know, more broadly communications, making stuff with brands, rather than, you know, just being an artist, for example, is the power of scale. The fact that when I'm working on a piece of work which is integral to a brand's success, you know, there is an incredible power there in terms of the way that you approach it, who you put in front and behind the camera, the stories that you're telling, how those stories are benefiting different communities, for example. You know, at every point there are options to, you know, even down to the, you know, working with the clients in terms of what products and services they offer, and a really deep understanding of the audience, which you have to have in this industry, or audiences. You know, our superpower is making really complex things simple and getting people to fall in love with them, and that's an incredibly powerful thing. So, you know, that's why I still really love what I do, and make sure, you know, when at every single stage when I'm looking at the work that we're producing and the way that we're operating as a business, that we're sort of living and breathing those values, because I feel like that's got the power that unless you're like a super famous artist, right, you'll never have. And
you've done some amazing things. I mean, I remember you know, you did that fun thing. It was at Carlsberg, Adopt a Keg or something. There's like there's been, I mean, I don't know whether you mind sharing a couple of the things that you're most proud of, because there's some amazing work that you've done. Congratulations. Not worthy. Well done.
You know what? I'm a little bit of I would say a magpie. There are things that I'm really proud of that I did, you know, 10, 15 years ago. Some of those would be Macmillan Infinite. So that was a piece of work for Macmillan Cancer Support. They wanted to lobby the government around fuel poverty for cancer patients. Their brief was to create like almost like an online letter generator that you could, you know, generate a letter and send to your local MP. We thought we could do something that maybe a bit noisier, so we created the world's first automated like knitting machine connected to the internet. So you could, this is a long time ago, so this is like the beginning of social media. But you could tweet a message around what keeps you warm, and that would get translated into a unique knitting pattern, which would get put into a scarf, and that scarf would be, so the scarf was being filmed as it was being knitted, and it ended up being longer than Big Ben. Kind of sat there for a month creating. It was basically it was a knitted petition, a way of signing a petition in a really beautiful way, and then that scarf was delivered to number 10. I think one of the royals took a bit up to Everest or something like that.
I remember writing about it. I used to write a blog about advertising.
I love that piece, and I love that piece because it was effective and it got the law changed, which is exactly the point. And I loved, again, a few years later, working on Barclays and developing life skills for Barclays, which is a program that's still going, and it's had, I don't know how many millions of young people now go through that program and get work experience out the other end. So those to me are like big career successes. But, you know, you always love the things that you're making at the moment most. I mean, I love Adopt a Keg. I think that was really clever way of Carlsberg doing something for their bars, so they're like on-trade partners, so keep them open during lockdown when you couldn't actually go to the bar. So a Dr. Keg is you buy a beer in the supermarket. For each beer you buy, you fill up a virtual keg, and then when the bar's open, you can go into the bar and pick up a beer. So a really nice way of driving footfall back into the bars when they opened, and that has gone from just being in Denmark to actually being a bit of an e-commerce platform globally, which is really nice. But I've done so much brilliant stuff for Pringles, who I love as clients. We've just launched something called Stay in the Game. It is a competition to basically take an NPC's job in a train sim game. And so your job will be filling a Pringles vending machine on the station in the game. But it's it's really lovely. So you will get mapped onto this character and you will stay in the game in perpetuity. For people to see out the window while they play train sims. So that's quite fun. And there's a really nice sort of, I guess, prize attached. So you get a virtual job, the world's first virtual job, I guess, as an NPC.
I love it.
But we make a lot of really, really nice stuff with them. We're doing some really exciting stuff at the moment, which is coming out for, around Christmas time, World Cup time, which is going to be great.
It's nice to see more humour in advertising as well, I think.
Yeah,
we've missed it the last sort of 5-6 years. It's nice to see it come back again.
Yeah, we did a really nice piece which actually picked up in Cannes this year as well, called Never Sent Without Consent, which, going back to being able to change things for real in the world. That my creative department is we have a lot of women in the department. A lot of the younger women were getting a lot of dick pics over COVID. For some reason, the number of dick pics went through the roof. So we did a piece of work. We worked with Brooke, the sexual health charity, who are fantastic, on a piece around, first of all, around educating people about non-consensual imagery of genitalia. Because, a lot of people send it and a lot of people don't think about the consequences.
It's okay. Yeah. Hopefully they'll stop ringing.
But then also to lobby the government to get unsolicited dick pics made illegal. So we did a really beautiful campaign, really stunning poster campaign, but over the top of the illustrations were of kind of bros taking dick pics of themselves. And then the QR code was over the willy with just, this is illegal in real life. Why isn't it online? But when you take the picture you snap the QR code, you get driven to Twitter to tweet your local MP again to build support around getting it put into the online harms bill, which we achieved, which is great. So that for me, again, is a really great piece of work because it achieved something. It's now in the online harms bill. Hopefully everything is now going to be passed with all the crazy stuff that's happening in government at the moment. I hope it doesn't delay the online harms bill. But to be able to get cyber flashing in there, like as a statement crime, we were really chuffed.
It's interesting that I guess the other thing in advertising is that not only do you get to affect change for lots and lots of people, but you get to do it in lots of different spaces. Like you were talking about Pringles and Carlsberg and then Macmillan. They're all very different audiences, very different industries. So I guess it must link into curiosity as well.
I think kind of like I think you have to be intrinsically curious to be a great creative. And certainly one of the things I love the most is the learning curve that you go on. So, you become an expert in high-end washing machines, right? And for 8 months or something, everything there is to do with every single washing machine. And then it might be a particular car or the way that braking systems work. And then it could be, when I started here and first got inducted into Pringles, it's a 5-hour induction course, which is fascinating because you learn so much about the history and why it's the shape that it is. And all of those things I find absolutely fascinating. And to be able to have a job where you're just served that opportunity to learn and to discover stuff all the time, I just think it's wonderful.
It definitely keeps it interesting. And what's the most interesting thing you've learned recently about anything, I guess?
Oh, gee, that's a really good question. I've learned a lot about juice. So at the moment, I feel like I'm an expert in juice. Juice of all kinds, how juice is consumed around the world, what kind of juices and juice characteristics are the ones that people in different countries love. Who drinks it? I mean, it's so interesting.
I remember learning that was it most wine is consumed within 24 hours of it leaving the supermarket. That was interesting.
Actually, I found a really good fact from one of my clients, which one of my creatives told me actually this week, which is cheese is the most stolen product out of British supermarkets.
What? I mean, that's kind of cool. I think that's good form. Like, I'm actually kind of proud of that. Like, it's a nice thing people are stealing. I guess it is crazy expensive, so fair enough. The other thing I saw, we mentioned just before the call started was this kind of power of mentors, and I read somewhere, I don't know whether it was you that started it or your colleague, it said there was a program that was called Who's Your Mama, which I just thought was such a cool name. Is that related to mentoring? And
it is. It's the SheSays mentoring platform. Right. So it's if there are any women or non-binary people out there who want a free mentor, we don't run it everywhere in the world, but we do run it in quite a few places, including the UK, and we match you up one-to-one with mentor.
And then you were talking about something new, I think, that you were doing, where you were saying, and I thought it was quite smart, you said you match not necessarily on industry, but on personality type or is that right?
So that's OCO, which I think I mentioned I kind of co-founded during COVID, and it is for the mentee. It's about helping that mentee find their superpower and bridge that attainment gap. So if you've never had a parent who's gone to university or has worked in a particular industry, you might not even know that's the industry for you. So it's pointless going, what do you want to be, when you leave school or whatever. I want to be an engineer, we'll put you with an engineer, because you might not know that is an option, particularly actually with the creative industries, but this is for any industry. And so we match through personality traits instead, and that just means, and it's actually quite magical to experience, that your mentor, your mentee, that you have a commonality. So therefore you can actually be a much more effective mentor. Like my first mentor through the program, and we were beta testing, this phenomenal guy called Eli. And it may not have been you wouldn't have thought it was an immediate fit, but he was so similar to me. He is so similar to me. So even things like turning up to a mentor appointment on the wrong day because you've got the day wrong is just something that I have done 1,000 times before, that kind of thing. And to be able to talk about then how maybe I mitigate that by managing my time a little bit better. But it gives you that really nice connection. And I think from a mentor's point of view, you obviously get leadership training, and it's a really clear 6-week program that you get taken through in order, to kind of showing you how to be a good mentor. But the other thing you get is connection to someone that you wouldn't have on the face of it thought you had a connection with. And I think, in this world where there's so much kind of separation and polarization of communities and opinions, just to go, you are completely different to me in every single way, except you're not. And there's a real commonality there. It's quite magical. So, that's something that we've worked on for the last 2.5 years, really, and it's just launching now. That's at weareoko.com if you're interested.
And that's marvelous. I'll put all the links to these in the comments and or in the description. But I mean, I'll there's a million other things I want to ask, but I know that we've only got like a few minutes left, so I'll try and end it on something slightly silly and creative, and ask you a weird question that we often ask people is, would you rather sing whenever you wanted to talk, or always dance whenever you wanted to walk?
Oh my goodness, I want to do both.
I mean, that is an answer. There is no right or wrong.
I would love to be in a position where I could do both, but possibly sing. But honestly, I'd much prefer to sing and dance than walk or talk.
If you were singing, what type of singing would it be? Are we going opera here? I mean, are we going rapping?
I'm actually a little bit of a industrial goth girl. That's kind of showing my age, I guess. Yeah. So it might be something along those lines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So would that be saying it with real passion and
with passion in a little bit in a minor key, maybe?
Nice.
I might be a little bit sinister. There might be some blood involved or something like that.
All right. Your team might get a bit scared, but apart from that, it sounds marvellous. You can counter it with a silly dance. So it sounds great. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I wish you all the very best of luck with everything you're doing. And I think if the world was full of more people like you, Lady Laura, I think it would be a much, much better place. So thank you so much for helping to inspire so many others to do that too. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.